Everyone thinks that teens in our world today use alcohol, tobacco, or drugs to cope with everyday struggles. You may think they do,
but they don't. Welcome to the But They Don't podcast, a podcast for teens by teens. Join us as we cover substance use prevention, mental health, community conversations, and more.
Welcome to another episode of But They Don't. We're back with another episode in our Fake and Fatal series. These episodes all have really important information, but this one contains information that can save a life. We're talking about overdose response, particularly fentanyl overdose response.
Before we go any further into this episode, we want to provide a trigger warning that there are some tough things to hear in the remainder of this episode. Now is the time to turn it off if you need to or if you choose to continue listening. Be sure to reach out to a trusted adult to discuss what you hear if you should need to.
You may be thinking, why do teenagers need to know about responding to fentanyl overdoses? Great question. From 2019 to 2021, the median monthly overdose deaths among persons aged 10 to 19 increased by 109%. Deaths involving illicitly manufactured fentanyls increased 182%. Counterfeit pills were present in nearly 25% of deaths. 2/3 of teens who passed away had one or more potential bystanders present, but most provided no overdose response.
Anyone can overdose on fentanyl. This is becoming more prevalent with counterfeit pills being mass-produced and sold as a legitimate pharmaceutical drug, but actually contains a lethal amount of fentanyl. In fact, in 2023, the DEA seized more than 78.4 million fentanyl-laced fake pills and nearly 12,000 pounds of fentanyl powder. These seizures are the equivalent of more than 388 million lethal doses. To put that into perspective, the population of the United States is 334.2 million, meaning that there were enough lethal doses seized in 2023 to kill every single American plus some.
An overdose occurs when a drug produces serious adverse effects and life-threatening symptoms. When people overdose on fentanyl, their breathing can slow or stop. This can decrease the amount of oxygen that reaches the brain, a condition called hypoxia. Hypoxia can lead to a coma and permanent brain damage and even death.
If you know what to look for and how to respond, you can potentially save someone's life. These are the typical signs of a fentanyl overdose to look for: severe sleepiness, sedation, slow, shallow breathing, nausea, respiratory arrest, lips and nails turning blue, confusion, the person is unresponsive or unconscious, gurgling sounds or snoring, cold and clammy skin, tiny pupils, drowsiness, respiratory depression, or coma.
If you think someone you are around is experiencing an overdose on fentanyl or any other opioid, call 911 and tell them someone is unresponsive and tell them exactly where you are. If you have naloxone, use it. More than one dose may be needed. Try to keep the person awake and breathing. If the person isn't breathing, do rescue breathing or CPR if you know it. Lay the person on their side to prevent choking. Stay with them. When paramedics arrive, tell them what you know. We have a law in South Carolina called the Good Samaritan Law that creates immunities or other legal protections for anyone who calls for help in the event of an overdose and cooperates with first responders fully. This law applies to teenagers and adults. 48 states and the District of Columbia all have Good Samaritan laws as it relates to overdose responses. Kansas and Wyoming do not have a Good Samaritan law for drug overdoses, but have a naloxone access law which protects individuals who administer the opioid reversal drug naloxone. These laws were enacted to encourage and protect bystanders who may otherwise not be willing to call for fear of being arrested for drug-related crimes. We'll put a link in the description of this week's episode for you to check out on your state-specific Good Samaritan laws.
If you have any questions about fentanyl and overdose response, we highly recommend checking out Real Deal on fentanyl.com or songforcharlie.org. We'll also have these in the description of this week's episode.
Be sure to follow us on social media to stay up to date on everything substance use prevention related.
We're on Facebook at Pickens County Youth Board and TikTok and Instagram at PCYB.
Tune in next week for an episode on the rising drug trend, xylazine. You may know it as Trank.
Thanks, bye!
Oh!